Are you prepared to invoke the Insurrection Act?
Depends on whether or not there's an insurrection. No, but you have violent people, and we're not going to let them get away with it. I think that you're going to see some very strong law and order.
That was President Trump yesterday talking about the riots that are unfolding in Los Angeles. And believe me, there are some real violent protests that are going on throughout that city. And this is starting to escalate into a bigger issue because as it's turning out, there's not just battles going on the ground that you're graphically seeing images of there. Most of these are from over this past weekend, but also a growing battle between the federal and state and local governments. And that is part of the issue here, that where this threatens to be a much bigger issue than whether or not there are riots. There's been riots in cities across the country forever. I mean, it goes all the way back to the beginning of our country. By itself, that's not anything particularly out of the ordinary. These things have a life. They have a beginning. They reach some crescendo, and then they end up tailing off. That's how they typically go. This one, though, has a couple of things that are concerning to me, and I'm going to show you toward the end of this why this is concerning to me because of a show we did last January that talked about some real underlying cracks and fissures in the American population and in our civil society, which are now we're seeing manifest on our screens before your eyes right now. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First of all, let's find out, let me just explain to you, kind of bring you up to date of what's going on. And all of this started on June the 6th, last week, when there was an ICE raid in Los Angeles. There were a number of ICE officials that came in, and really probably the biggest flashpoint came at a Home Depot in downtown LA, where all of these ICE guys come in, and of course they're kitted up to the maximum. They literally look like combat soldiers. They don't look like policemen or what you might have in the past thought of an ICE agent. They genuinely look like troops, which by itself really scared a lot of people. And we got to understand that a way a lot of these things look on the ground is valid in terms of how people are reacting to it. It's important that you have to apply the laws. If there are people here, they're violated the law, they've overstayed their visa, they don't have legal or permission to be in the country, then it is an obligation of our society, or whether that's federal, state, or local, to enforce the laws. That's the underlying premise that is we need to understand from the beginning. That is a valid use of law enforcement to detain and deport, if necessary, people who are here illegally. You can not like that. You can think they should be here. You can think they shouldn't be taken care of. Those are debates that can be had. That's fair game for discussion. But if you violated the law, the discussion has to be on the other side of detainment. You can change the laws. You can change, the conditions that are whatever. Those are things that lawmakers do, and that's at the political level. But the laws that exist right now, they have to be enforced. However, at the same time, you also have to do it in a way that is going to bring stability, law and order. That's the key part as well, law and order. It can't just be heavy-handed so much that it causes more chaos and more disorder and potentially more violence. So it does matter how you take care of this. But listen, this is a tough situation. This is not something where there's any easy answers. And what I'm going to show you here's what the various sides of this debate are saying and where this is at right now. And I'll just tell you at the front, there's no clear cut, this guy's right, that guy's wrong, or this group is right and this one is wrong here. This is a multifaceted, complicated issue that just belies any kind of easy answers here. But there needs to be answers found, because if this thing continues to escalate, whether on the ground with the violence or between Washington and California at the political level, there are potential problems here for our country that we need to be paying attention to, far more than just what happens on the screen here. Let's also understand clearly at first, there is a lot of violence on the ground now. And there's various accusations back and forth between who's responsible for a lot of this violence, but there is violence. So we need to be clear on that, whether, again, local, federal, state officials, this does need to be brought into control, because the population at large, the reason why we have government, one of them, is to provide security. We're not talking about national security at the moment overseas. We're talking about domestically. We need to be able to have confidence that we can go down the street to the store without worrying about whether someone's going to light our car on fire, throw a rock through our window when we're driving down the road, or take other kinds of violence against us. Everybody deserves that kind of security. So let's see what we're going to do about this. So part of the problem with this Home Depot issue is the imagery that it had of these, what looks like combat soldiers grabbing all these people, just inflamed a lot of people. Now, again, if you're on the side, and there were some who say that we shouldn't be grabbing those people, that's a debate you can have. But the fact is that they're here illegally. But we also have to make sure that we don't cause more fear among the population while we're trying to provide that order. So that was what happened. Now, you got to understand, this is a sensitive issue for President Trump, because this whole issue of immigration, of taking care of, getting all the illegal people out of the country and all that, and arresting people who have violent criminal history, et cetera, that has been a hallmark all during his campaign, and certainly since he's been in office since then. So when you have his signature issue all of a sudden sparking protest inside of California against that process, then he takes that personally. Now, here's where things get a little bit dicey. So all those images that Gary's already been showing you here, you see that there's no kidding, lots of genuine violence here. And that does need to have both the LA civil police as well as the state resources that Gavin Newsom has. And they have been employing those in there. Now, the question comes in, does Trump have both the right, and is it wise to send in the federal reinforcements, i.e. federalize the National Guard and send them into this situation here? That's where it gets a little bit tricky. So the protest began on the 6th of June, and on the 7th of June, so just one day later, when all of these images start splashing across Trump's screens and when he watches the news in Washington, he issues an executive order. And this has got some important information in it, and let's make sure we're aware of this. Don't just hear he signed this executive order and send 2,000 National Guard troops to the border. If you can put that executive order up on the screen, there's important provisions in this that we need to pay attention to. There we go. So the President Trump said under his authority, the members, he has signed this this order, and he says the members and units of the National Guard called into federal service shall be at least 2,000 National Guard personnel, and the duration shall be for 60 days or at the discretion of the Secretary of Defense. So key point first, that 2,000 is the floor, it's not the ceiling, and 60 days is the beginning, and it can go more at the discretion of the Secretary of Defense. Secondly, in addition, he continues, the Secretary of Defense may employ any other members of the regular armed forces as necessary to augment and support the protection of the federal functions and property in any number determined appropriate in his discretion. Now, you can see already that's lining up to be a problem, because you have the LA mayor, who's in charge of the police force there, and Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, who say, yes, there was an issue, we're handling it, we're dealing with it, and we don't need the federal government. But now that you have the Secretary of Defense has been given the authority to send federal troops in there, and this raises a whole number of problems. For example, who is in command of the situation here? If the issue is to bring order to the riots in LA, who's in charge? Because now that you have federal troops, at the same time you have regular LA policemen and whatever resources the governor has, and you have them all operating in this area. And there is obviously a lot of animosity between the leaders of those. So the question is, on the ground, who's in charge? Because let me just tell you, when you get a situation to where nobody's in charge, you have all kinds of problems for real difficulties. Because you may have one group that says we should do this, and then another group that says, no, we should do this. And if they're not coordinated and nobody's in command of them, that means they can both operate at cross purposes. Now, Jennifer Griffin of Fox News actually tweeted this out, talking to a former acting vice chief of the National Guard Bureau, Major General Randy Manner, who said he had some problems with it because he said, quote, "The president's federal deployment of the National Guard over the official wishes of a governor is bad for all Americans concerned about freedom of speech and states' rights. The governor has the authority and ability to respond to the civil disturbances with law enforcement capabilities within his state, augmented as necessary by requesting law enforcement assistance from other governors." So bottom line is there are plenty other opportunities for the state and local officials to take care of this as they see fit. And you got to admit, if you've forced in federal troops or federalizing National Guard troops commanded by the Secretary of Defense from Washington in antagonism of the local and state officials, you've got some problems because you didn't even give them a chance to figure this out. And again, some of those images that Gary was showing you, so there's no kidding a lot of violence. There's no question about that. The question is, though, the real question is sending in federal troops now, 24 hours in opposition to the local and federal and state of, the state and federal and local officials, is that going to help or inflame? And obviously you've got a lot of disputes about where that comes down to. And let me just show you a little bit here, because another comment here from President Trump when he's explaining why he's doing what he's doing.
Oh, I think it was a riot. I think it was very bad. It was covered really as a riot by almost everybody. We're not going to let this happen to our country. We're not going to let our country be torn apart.
What is the bar for sending Marines to
the bar is what I think it is. I mean, if we see danger to our country and to our citizens, we'll be very, very strong in terms of law and order. It's about law and order.
Sending active Marines on the table, sir. Secretary Hegseth.
We're going to see what we need. We'll send whatever we need to make sure there's law and order.
Yeah, and again, that objective is great, law and order, no question about it. But the problem comes in as to how you're going to create order, because there are those on the ground who think that instead of bringing peace and order, you're actually bringing chaos. We're going to get to that in just a second. But first of all, let's take a look at what Tom Homan, the border czar, who's, of course, the guy that was in charge of sending all these guys for the ICE raid. He took exception to something. Let me set this up for you here, because there's a claim that the L.A. Mayor Bass actually blocked some LA policemen from helping FBI officials. That was the claim. Now, just so you understand ahead of this, there was a whistleblower that said that the LA mayor blocked the LAPD from going to help us, the FBI and some other, I think the ICE people who had requested help. Now, what she claims is that I didn't delay it. She goes, I'm not going to send troops until I know what's going on. So she said she asked for an intelligence community update and assessment so she knew what was going to happen before she sent it. You can come down wherever you want on whether she should or shouldn't have done that, whether she should act it first and listen later. But here's how it's being characterized from Washington.
You know the call. You were a local cop before you were a federal agent. When a cop says officer assist across the radio that they're surrounded, everyone in the surrounding area is supposed to respond. So who told the LA cops not to respond?
That's Karen Bass. And they were delayed. They were very delayed in responding to the call for assistance. Like I was here, and they had over 1,000 protesters at the federal building trying, and they breached it several times. Luckily, they were able to push them back, and that put the officers at great risk. It put the detainees that we had in custody at great risk. So again, this is just a false narrative being pushed by the left and being pushed by even members of Congress about men and women of ICE being Nazis and terrorists, and that we're out raiding, arresting innocent women and children. Everybody we arrested, everybody we're looking for, they got final order removal. They've had the due process. That's what they keep shouting about. They demand due process. They had the due process. A judge, a federal judge, has ordered them removed. Our job is to execute that order.
See, now what you're going to see here is in his characterization of this issue, he's taking it off of what's actually happening on the ground, and he's expanding the lens to say this is a right versus left thing. You know, those darn Democrats, that's the problem here. So now then you're saying this is an issue bigger than just whatever was happening on the ground on the 6th of June in LA about an ICE raid. And so now then you're antagonizing just the political divide in the country already. And this is something we've been talking about on this show for quite a number of months, that there is a growing problem inside America over a cleavage between the two sides, to where it's not just, I like my side better and I don't like your side. It's growing into more. We've talked about this a lot. A lot of people do. there is growing hatred between the two. Now that you get a situation like this where you have a lot of tinder and a lot of things that could explode and blare up, then you have more reason for the sides to bow up and get against each other. Holman continued.
The National Guard here to protect property, protect life, protect our officers, and protect civilians. You've seen the video. This city's burning. It's out of control because of the weak leadership of Democrats here in the state and frankly, in the United States Congress. So I salute President Trump for sending National Guard to protect life and property. And the travel ban is exactly what it should be doing. In the countries that are being targeted on this, do not do proper vetting before they issue visas come to this country. This is about protecting America. And when you send someone, give someone a visa come and they enter the United States, we want proper vetting done before they come here. That's what this is about.
See, there's a conflation of issues here, because on the one hand, he's talking about immigration policy. He's also talking about political issues right and left. He's also talking about the National Guard on the ground. But listen, this is all happening so fast. I think that it's reasonable. In my opinion, it is reasonable to say, okay, let's let the state and local officials see if they can handle this. If they need help, we've got it available. If the president had said, here, I've got 2,000 National Guardsmen on standby, I can send them to your help anytime, just let me know, then that would have been a different situation. That might have actually helped, because now then the LA and the California officials can say, okay, we're handling this, we're dealing with it. But if it gets too big and our resources can't handle it, then we know we have the federal government over our shoulder to help out. Now you have a cooperative issue. But when you basically shove it down their throats and say, I don't care whether you want it or not, I'm going to put this in there, you can see where that's going to escalate the competition between the two, and it's not going to help. And again, don't overlook this. It's a big issue. Who's got command and control authority on the ground here? Because you have to have, I mean, it's a standard military dictum, and it applies whether you're talking about domestic or international. There's got to be somebody in charge. You have to have unity of command. You cannot have competing commands, because then that means that no matter what happens on the ground, it's going to be uncoordinated. And when you have the officials themselves, and now all the way down to the tactical level at the ground, working in antagonism towards one another, then there's no cooperation. And so you're going to have even more of these issues come up, in addition to all of the violent offenders that are taking care of, that are doing these things, all of whom need to be arrested and put in jail, because no matter where you come down on this politics, you cannot violate the law in your opinion. And you see a lot of that stuff that Gary was showing on there. That's just flat out wanton violence. And, you know, burning these self-driving taxis, throwing rocks at police cars that could literally kill somebody. I mean, it's as violent and uncoordinated as it can possibly be, and that needs to be quelled. We don't want to complicate the issue of trying to bring order by having competition between the various levels of government and law enforcement officials. That's the real thing that we need to walk here. Now, let me not just throw a bunch of rocks, verbal rocks, at the Trump administration, because you see the other side is just as antagonistic. Here is Mayor Bass also blaming the administration.
What we're seeing in LA is chaos caused by the administration. People should exercise their right to protest. That's their First Amendment right. But people should also exercise that right peacefully. We do not want to play into the administration's hands. We're working with officials, we're organizing resources, but what we're seeing in Los Angeles is chaos that is provoked by the administration. When you raid Home Depot and workplaces, when you tear parents and children apart, and when you run armored caravans through our streets, you cause fear and you cause panic. And deploying federalized troops is a dangerous escalation. But the most important thing right now is that our city be peaceful. And so protests and expressing your, fears, your beliefs is appropriate to do, but it is just not appropriate for there to be violence.
Okay, she's right. Categorically, we do have to protect. In addition to bringing order and law to the streets to keep people safe, we also have to defend their constitutional rights to protest, to give their voice to whatever position that they hold, whether we like it or whether we hate it. It doesn't make any difference as long as it's peaceful. So you can't go so far as to quell any dissidents or in any people standing up against what you have to say in the interest of law and order. order doesn't trump the Constitution. So you have to be able to have the peaceful protest, but it can never cross without action. And that's just the truth of it. So whether you agree with 100% what they're protesting, you also have to 100% disagree with the methods they're using. But then again, you see the mayor here is jumping and basically doing the same thing Holman's doing. He's blaming the Democrats for this. And now then you see them blaming the administration, i.e. the Republicans, on this. And they're now opposed as well. So you're seeing a tit for tat kind of situation even going on within the law enforcement agency. And that extends up to the governor. That was the mayor. You saw Tom Homan a minute ago. Well, apparently he has actually threatened to arrest both the mayor and the governor if they don't do what he says. Ergo, what I said a minute ago about some real problems with command and control. So you see, you can even have fights even among the people who are in charge of these different organizations. Here is Newsom's response to being threatened with arrest.
We are here to support local law enforcement, the sheriff's office, LAPD, but they didn't need that support. He made this up. This is a manufactured crisis.
Tom Homan, the border czar, said to me yesterday he did not rule out literally arresting you, nor Mayor Bass, if you interfere in his work. He said you hadn't yet.
He's a tough guy. Why doesn't he do that? He knows where to find me. The hell is this guy? Come after me, arrest me. Let's just get it over with. Tough guy.
So that's not a good situation. When you have all that violence on the ground and the terrifying the population, making them, I mean, you can't even go to the grocery store in some of these areas because you're terrified of even getting on the road. That is something that needs to be fixed. The federal, local, and state authorities need to be working together to address the law and order issues, but also work in a cooperative manner. Right now, there are basically two Americas. You've heard me say this before, and we're seeing it on graphic display right now. You have the red America, you have the blue America, and they are antagonistic towards one another. You've read lots of stories about this for quite a long time, especially when it come around the 2024 election. It always comes up to the press where people talk about how the blue America and the red America view each other as antagonistic. They view them as hatred. They view them as a threat to the survival of the country. There have even been some reporting that certain percentages, and not small percentages, of each side say that in certain circumstances, the use of violence against that side is justified. We are seeing these fissures expand here. Now, on, I think it was January 28th, so 8 days after President Trump was inaugurated, I had on this show Stephen March, who's the author of the book, The Next Civil War. And I was concerned about that because his contention in the book is that the conditions for a civil war already exist in the United States. It's already there, but what we're waiting for is, or holding our breaths against, maybe a better way to put it, is the spark that could ignite the tinder. And in his book, he has several theoretical ways that something could happen, and he demonstrates how one of these seemingly small spark could ignite this tinder that's already there, and then you could have a civil war. Something that's by itself was an issue, but not a big one. But because of the existence of this fissures that already existed between the countries, you could have an explosion. Now, this is mere days into this, so hopefully this is not one of those cases, but it's important to watch. Here is a small portion of my interview with Stephen Marsh.
That was the point of the book, is that the dry tinder is there. How it's going to play out, no one knows. But if you read the data, you can tell.
As we kind of close out here, I wonder if you can kind of help people get a sense of it. So whether, because you said a minute ago, there could be any of a dozen, maybe even plural dozens of potential sparks that could cause something. But once something happens, what does it look like on the ground? What does it manifest in say, Lubbock, Texas, out in the middle of nowhere, or in somewhere in the middle of Alabama or so? For just regular people, how would this manifest on the ground if the spark catches on fire?
Well, I mean, when I was trying to establish that, I was talking to a lot of veterans. I was talking to a lot of soldiers who'd come from Civil War situations. I mean, essentially what it is terrible violence, like horrific levels of violence that are incredibly devastating to communities. And then the attempt to clamp down that violence to give a space.
Yeah, that right there, as you see, that's how he said just theoretically it could happen. Well, obviously, that's exactly what's happening so far here. It does remain to be seen whether this just turns into an ugly situation between the federal, state, and local government officials and then goes down, whether this gets tamped down, whether maybe it can still work on the ground. I certainly hope so. There's every possibility that it could, but this is concerning, and it should concern every American, because we have to see that there are consequences to hating the other side, to saying that under certain circumstances, violence could be appropriate for the other side if they don't do what I want. If you're really pro on the Trump side about immigration policies and, getting rid of all the illegals, whatever, and you say, yes, those Democrats, those in Congress, or whether in LA, the left coast, all this, that they need to be put down in with violence if possible, or the converse of that. If you turn the federal people into your enemy and you use that kind of language, then you're going to maybe even to make the protesters turn against them as well, or others may join into that. You see, this could get out of hand really fast. The adults that are in charge of this at the LA level, at the California level, and at the federal government level need to cool the verbal jets here. And we need to start working together. You can hold your tongue, do whatever you need to do, hold your nose, whatever it takes, but you guys have to figure out how to work together, because those scenes of violence on the ground there are not fake and are not going away because you squabble with each other. But if you work together, if you cooperate with all of your resources and just get along as adults like you're expected to do, like what we hired you to do with our elections, we don't want you to fight each other. We want you to work cooperatively to bring peace and stability and safety for us on our own streets. That's what we demand, and that's what we expect. Let's hope that that's exactly where it ends up. But because this is an evolving situation right here on our own home, I thought it was important to bring it to you today. We appreciate you guys very much. Thanks for watching, and we will look forward to seeing you later this afternoon on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.